My name is Ava Langston. I'm 26 years old. And this is the story of how I was kicked out of my family's mansion to make room for the golden child, only to take everything they valued most. Started with a knock. Not the kind that waits for permission. The door swung open with the entitled flair I'd come to associate with my stepmother's presence. She was already halfway into my room before I even turned around in my chair. "Ava, we need your room." Her voice was flat. No warmth. No pretense. Just a command disguised as a sentence. I blinked at her, disoriented for a second, still mentally half-buried in a string of code I'd been optimizing since before sunrise. "Excuse me. Chloe's moving back in," she continued, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "She needs a proper space to set up her consulting office. And your room gets the best Wi-Fi signal." She glanced around like she was surveying a cluttered garage, not the space where I had spent the last 3 years building something from scratch. My flowcharts, neural net diagrams, algorithm sketches pinned to the walls, monitors blinking with real-time market data. To her it was chaos. To me, it was the heart of a machine that was almost ready to roar. "You'll be fine in the garage," she added casually. "We cleared it out this morning." I stared at her. This wasn't just a slight. It was a message. A message I'd heard in different ways for years. "You don't belong. You're not the chosen one. You're not Chloe." Before I could respond, my father appeared behind her. Always the closer in her little power plays. "It's time you stopped playing techie and started thinking seriously about your future," he said, folding his arms. "Like Chloe. Chloe. The family jewel. Fresh off her MBA from Wharton, armed with a LinkedIn profile that practically screamed, born to lead, blessed by legacy. She hadn't worked a day outside a boardroom or without the cushion of family funds, but somehow she was always the success story. "I already have a job," I muttered, more to myself than to them. "A job?" My stepmother scoffed. "You mean playing stock market on your laptop?" Could have screamed. I could have shown them the Zephr dashboard, the proprietary engine I'd been coding for the last 3 years that could analyze market patterns with uncanny precision. I could have pulled up the shell companies, the seed rounds, the contracts signed under strict NDAs. But what would be the point? They didn't want to see. So I stood up and turned away. Not defeated. Just done. "Fine," I said. "I'll go." They didn't even look surprised. Maybe they'd rehearsed this moment. Maybe they thought they'd finally broken me. "You've got until noon," my father added. "Her new desk gets delivered tomorrow." Noon. The irony nearly made me laugh. Because at exactly noon tomorrow, Zephr would go live. Back in the garage, I opened my phone. A message blinked on my encrypted app. "Arjun, launch protocol locked. Zephr goes live at 12 o'clock Pacific Standard Time." 12 o'clock. On the dot. Smiled. Because while they were too busy redecorating my old room for someone else's fake empire, I'd been building a real one. In silence. In secret. In the very garage they thought I was too pathetic to leave. They didn't know that the job I supposedly had, lead quant for a startup, was a front. That Zephr Technologies wasn't just some tech fantasy. It was real. And it was lethal in all the ways that mattered to people like them. It was going to rip apart the very financial structures they clung to for their sense of superiority. And tomorrow, I'd start by gutting the institution they trusted most, the one they used to pay for Chloe's degrees, their club memberships, their Botoxed brunches. Meridian Trust, their bank, the one I now owned. As I boxed up my monitors, Chloe's voice rang through the house, high-pitched and honey-sweet. "Mom, should we go with modern glam or coastal chic for Ava's old room?" Ava's old room. She didn't even hesitate. I paused, fingers curling tighter around a strip of packing tape. They always said my stay here was temporary, that I'd move on when I got my act together, when I was more like Chloe. What they didn't realize was that I had moved on, long ago. But I'd waited, played small, let them think they were winning, because some victories only matter when they come full circle. At 11:52 that night, I clicked one line of code. Initiate Tiger Precaution Authorization. Zephr Prime. A soft chime echoed in my laptop speakers. Protocol Tiger initiated. System-wide execution begins in 8 hours. 8 hours. 8 hours until every account at Meridian Trust tied to Langston Equity Holdings would be flagged, reviewed, and frozen for audit. The same accounts they used to wire Chloe's tuition. The same ones they told me had nothing left when I asked for seed money to build something of my own. Closed the laptop. Stepped outside. It wasn't glamorous. Not yet. The garage was cold, the air heavy with dust and ego and disappointment. But it was mine. And by tomorrow everything would be different. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I couldn't. Because I didn't need to. The adrenaline humming under my skin was stronger than caffeine, more sustaining than comfort. I sat cross-legged on the garage floor, surrounded by wires, screens, and boxes, feeling more alive in that drafty space than I ever had upstairs. They had handed me exile. But I had been preparing for a coronation. At 7:14 a.m. my phone buzzed. Arjun, Tiger has taken root. System crawling all accounts. Results coming in strong. I tapped into the Zephr backend. Clean, sharp dashboards bathed in soft cyan light. Columns of data flickered like pulses. I watched as one by one, accounts flagged under Langston Equity Holdings began populating the red list. Accounts Chloe and my father swore didn't exist. Suspicious trust activity. Transfer laundering. Off-ledger bonuses. More than enough for a full SEC audit. At 9:02 a.m., a ping from my assistant Serena echoed in my earbuds. Serena, your briefing at HQ is confirmed. Boardroom at 9:45. Town car en route. I grabbed my coat. Cashmere, navy. Gifted to myself last year when Zephr secured our first major client. My stepmother never noticed. Or maybe she did but assumed it was a knockoff. That was her talent. Seeing only what she expected, never what was real. When I stepped outside, the sun was climbing. Palo Alto looked as polished and hollow as ever, like a showroom house no one actually lived in. I walked past Chloe's new desk boxed on the porch like some sort of divine offering. The decorator's van was already out front. Inside I heard her laughing. That manufactured, gleaming sound that once could make my stomach turn. It didn't anymore. Because this time the joke was on her. I slid into the waiting town car without a word and opened my laptop. One last check before the fire started to spread. Zephr Pulse, our flagship AI trading engine, had already surpassed expected uptake by 43% in pre-market. Institutions that once turned me down were now scrambling to buy access. But the most poetic part, Meridian Trust, my family's holy grail of financial superiority, was trending top 5 in tech media under the headline, Mysterious FinTech Startup Acquires Legacy Bank in Silent Coup. No one knew yet who was behind Zephr. Not officially. That would come tonight. But I knew. And that was enough. When the elevator opened at Zephr HQ, it felt like stepping into another life. The contrast between the garage and the top floor of arc-like towers was staggering. Sleek obsidian floors. Glass panels etched with equations I'd once scrawled on the back of receipts. A life I built line by line, algorithm by algorithm. No shortcuts. No inheritance. Just relentless work. Serena was waiting, tablet in hand. Launch confirmed, she said softly, guiding me into the boardroom. And, Ava. It's beautiful. You did it. I didn't smile. Not yet. I needed the full detonation. But her words stayed with me as I briefed the board, as we celebrated with espresso instead of champagne. Our team never wasted time. We toasted with code. At 12:01 p.m., Zephr Pulse officially launched. At 12:02 p.m., Chloe's corporate card was declined. By 12:05, I had 4 missed calls from my father and 2 from my stepmother. By 12:10, their entire portfolio was locked pending review. And still they didn't know it was me. Not yet. But they would. I was parked in front of Bellara by 6:50 p.m., 10 minutes before the dinner reservation. My hybrid hummed quietly. I checked my reflection once, fixing the pin in my hair. A touch of red at my lips. Just enough to unsettle. I still remembered the last time I'd been here. 5 years ago. I stood in a server's uniform, clearing plates while my family toasted Chloe's early admittance to Wharton. I had watched them clink crystal glasses under chandeliers, while sweat collected under my apron. That night they didn't even notice me. Tonight I'd make sure they had no choice. Bernard, the maitre d', met me at the door. "Miss Langston," he said with a bow, his French accent heavy with reverence. "Welcome home." Interesting word, that. "Not tonight, Bernard," I murmured. "I'm joining the family." They were in the corner booth. Their favorite. My father, already sipping his usual. My stepmother, eyeliner sharp, nerves visible only in the tight set of her jaw. And Chloe, radiant as ever, commanding the table like it was her birthright. When they saw me, there was a beat of hesitation. As if I'd shown up to a wedding uninvited. "Ava," my stepmother said, tone stretched thin. "You actually came." "We already ordered," my father added without looking up. I slid into the empty seat at the end of the table. As always, furthest from the center. They wouldn't dare offer me the spotlight. Chloe leaned forward, grinning. "Business must be good, huh? Or did you finally get tired of couch surfing?" I stared at her, calm as stone. "Actually," I said, "business is shifting. Did you hear about the board changes at Meridian Trust?" My father's fork froze midair. His eyes darted to mine. "What board changes?" The waiter arrived, uncorking champagne. "My treat," my stepmother said brightly, pulling out her card. I sipped my water. Waited. Moments later he returned. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Your card was declined." She blinked. "That's ridiculous. Try again." "3 times, ma'am. Perhaps another." My father sighed, pulled out his own. The same result. Then Chloe, always the savior, offered hers. Morgan Stanley. The one she flaunted during brunches and brunch-inspired Instagram captions. "That won't work either," I said quietly. They all turned to me. "What do you mean?" my father asked. I looked him straight in the eye. "There's been a change in leadership. As of this morning, all account activity at Meridian Trust falls under new management." Silence. Utter, consuming silence. My stepmother's hand trembled slightly. "Ava," she whispered. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying," I replied, "that the system flagged a series of concerning activities across your accounts. Until those are resolved, everything's frozen." My father's face darkened. "How do you know this?" I leaned in. "Because I built it." You could have heard a pin drop. My stepmother's mouth hung open slightly, like a clock wound too tight and finally breaking. My father just stared at me. Not with anger, at least not yet, but with confusion, that particular breed of disbelief born in men who've never been told no by someone they thought was beneath them. Chloe was the first to speak. "That's absurd," she said with a sharp laugh. You built a system like that." "I work at some garage startup," she added, the words dripping with sarcasm. I tilted my head steady. The mask I wore in meetings, in pitch decks, in boardrooms where men twice my age tried to talk over me. "That startup," I said, "is a public node. One of many." Chloe blinked. "Zephr Technologies," I continued. "You might have heard of it. Autonomous AI, market disruption, financial infrastructure scanning." I saw the flicker in my father's eyes. Recognition. Panic. He'd read the articles. Just hadn't put it together yet. "Impossible," he muttered. "Zephr is global, private, funded by institutions that don't even appear on Bloomberg." "You're telling me you did that?" "Yes." The waiter returned, awkward and unsure, holding the bill. I waved him off. "This dinner's on me," I said. Then I pulled a sleek, black card from my clutch. Zephr Prime. Embossed with nothing but the shimmer of our insignia in silver foil. The waiter's eyes widened slightly. He bowed. "Of course, Miss Langston." "Langston," my father repeated. I never changed my name, I said, cool as frost. You just forgot to ask where it was going. Hit them then. Not all at once. More like a slow, terrifying dawn. I watched the realization bloom across their faces. My father, pale beneath his tan. My stepmother, gripping her napkin like it might anchor her to this version of reality. Chloe. She just stared, blinking too fast. Her brain refusing to compute a version of the world where she wasn't the most accomplished woman in the room. You bought Meridian? My father asked. You bought our bank? He nodded. 3 months ago. We used offshore holding companies to keep it quiet. But as of this morning, Zephr Technologies owns 89% of Meridian Trust. Chloe finally found her voice. But why? I leaned back in my seat, eyes sweeping across the table. Because this is what you do to people who tried to erase you. My stepmother reached forward, voice trembling. Ava. Sweetheart. This isn't necessary. We're family. Family. Echoed. You mean the kind that evicts you from your own room for better Wi-Fi? The kind that skips your graduation for a wine tasting? I've worked for 3 years in silence. I coded the first Zephr neural engine on a cracked laptop in a garage you thought was punishment. I built a company while you were building Chloe's resume. And now I own the very infrastructure that props up your legacy. My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. Power speaks softest when it's real. Chloe let out a nervous laugh. You can't freeze my accounts. I have nothing to do with this. I turned to her. Chloe, your accounts were flagged for insider allocation discrepancies. Unreported bonuses. Undisclosed partnerships with firms now under investigation. What? You'll likely get a call from your Morgan Stanley director, I added. Assuming your badge still works by morning. My father stood suddenly. You can't do this. I already did, I said flatly. His eyes burned. This is revenge, he hissed. No, I said, standing too. This is justice. I looked to Bernard, who had discreetly returned to the edge of the booth. Cancel their regular table, I said, sliding the black card back into my purse. Effective immediately. We're undergoing a change in clientele. He nodded, not even blinking. My family was silent. I adjusted the collar of my coat. The world outside Bellara glimmered through the window, neon reflections dancing against the glass like the future itself was celebrating. Oh, and Chloe. I turned just before leaving. If you need a place to stay. The garage gets great sunlight this time of year. Her face twisted, but she didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. I didn't look back as I walked through the gilded doors of Bellara. But I felt it. All of it. The weight of years, the burden of being overlooked, underestimated again, and now finally the release. The moment I stepped outside, my phone buzzed. Arjun, Protocol Tiger. All systems holding. EC probe imminent. Zephr Pulse has gone viral. Market cap tripled since noon. Took a breath. The air smelled different. Cleaner. Sharper. This was no longer about revenge. It was about return. About reclamation. About the moment you stop asking to be seen, and make them open their eyes. The next morning began not with an alarm, but with silence. That rare, golden kind that feels earned. No banging on my door. No Chloe's voice echoing down the halls. No hollow footsteps on marble floors built more for display than living. Just stillness and power. I was home. My real home. 34 floors above San Francisco. Inside the penthouse suite I'd purchased under the shell firm Nova Ridge Holdings. Paid in full. No mortgage. No strings. Just clean ownership. The kind that couldn't be revoked by family decisions or shifted loyalties. My phone buzzed at 7:03 a.m. Arjun, Tiger Phase 2 initiated. CC request for records came in 6 minutes ago. Audit logs auto-shared. I sat up in bed, heart steady. They were coming. Not for me. For them. Chloe, my father, every board member at Langston Equity Holdings who'd signed off on the hidden trust accounts, the creative accounting, the network of shell partnerships. All of it was now in the system. And Zephyr's audit protocols didn't miss. We'd built the AI to do more than make money. It scanned patterns, flagged anomalies, traced digital trails even legacy systems missed. And now, it was doing exactly what I trained it to do. Tear through deception like a buzzsaw. At 7:45 a.m., CNBC ran the story. Langston Equity under federal investigation following Zephr acquisition. They used the word scandal 3 times in the first paragraph. My father's name trended on Twitter beneath the tags #financial fraud and #goldenchildgate. I sipped my espresso in silence as the morning unfolded like a symphony of karma. At 8:13 a.m., Serena patched through a call from our media advisor. Wall Street Journal wants an exclusive, he said, voice electric. They're calling Zephr the Oracle engine. They want a quote from the founder. On record. Paused, then smiled. Tell them Ava Langston will give them something poetic. Because poetic was the only way to describe this arc. I remembered being 17, asking my father for $10,000 to attend a coding boot camp. He said no. Said it wasn't worth it. That I should get a degree in something real. That $10,000, money he refused me while buying Chloe a Range Rover, was the seed of everything I built myself. I learned to code on borrowed machines, scraping resources, teaching myself with open-source forums and late-night YouTube videos. Now my code was scanning the accounts he once used to funnel bonuses to his own offshore trusts. Poetic. At 9 a.m., Serena entered my office holding a familiar envelope. From Bellara, she said. I opened it slowly. Inside. A handwritten note from Bernard. Your family's reservation has been permanently cancelled. But your table, Miss Langston, is always ready. I laughed. Not out of cruelty, but because the universe really did have a rhythm when you listened long enough. By mid-afternoon, Chloe's entire department at Morgan Stanley was under review. A confidential tip, submitted via Zephr's whistleblower portal, had triggered a probe into multiple hires and promotions made without disclosure of familial relationships to external vendors. The tip was anonymous. But let's just say I'd spent years documenting. At 2:17 p.m., Chloe texted me for the first time in almost 8 months. Chloe, what did you do? They pulled my badge. I didn't reply. There's a power in silence, especially when they finally realize you're the one holding the microphone. At 3:22 p.m., another alert. Zephr had officially passed Coinbase and Charles Schwab in daily platform activity. Analysts began calling it the new standard. Every click, every confirmation, every line of adoption, it validated what they'd always refused to believe. That I wasn't just coding in a garage. I was rewriting the rules of the entire financial system. And it all started with them pushing me out. Funny, isn't it? How sometimes, being cast aside is the beginning of becoming untouchable. That night, I walked into a private industry gala in downtown San Francisco. The same one I'd snuck into once 5 years ago, borrowing a badge from a friend just to listen to panels from the back row. This time, I was on the guest list. Top of it. The woman at check-in smiled as she scanned my name. Oh, she said, you're that Ava Langston. We've been waiting to meet you. Inside the ballroom, I was no longer invisible. Heads turned. People whispered. Handshakes extended. Eyes watched with caution and admiration. Gave a keynote. 20 minutes. Told the story of Zephr without names, without bitterness. Just truth. I spoke about being underestimated. About being told I wasn't enough. About how real innovation doesn't need approval. Needs obsession. Sacrifice. Silence. And the audacity to move without applause. And when I finished, the room stood up. Every last person. Not for Chloe. Not for my father. Not for the legacy they clung to. But for the girl they all forgot. The one who built something too big to ignore. Success isn't loud. Not real success. It doesn't scream from rooftops or demand recognition. It moves like a shadow. Quiet, deliberate, untouchable. That's how it felt the week after the gala. Every major outlet had run some version of the story. Unknown tech founder behind Zephr emerges as financial powerhouse. Ava Langston, the silent storm of Wall Street. One article even called me the invisible architect. I liked that one best, because that's exactly what I had become, an architect of my own future, brick by silent brick. And yet, somewhere beneath the headlines, beneath the numbers and boardroom victories, was something harder to process. The silence from my family. Not a call, not a message, not even an attempt to apologize. But I didn't expect one. What would they say? They'd spent years shaping a world where I was the afterthought, where Chloe's failures were framed as ambitious risks, and my successes were called lucky flukes, where asking for support meant being told to grow up, while Chloe was given blank checks and press coverage. So I didn't wait for them to come around. I just kept building. Because Zephr wasn't done. Our next phase was expansion. Europe, Asia, institutional integration, decentralized indexing. What we'd launched was only the beginning. Still, late one night, as I stood in front of my glass balcony overlooking the city, I asked myself a question that surprised me. Was it enough? Not the money. Not the recognition. But the moment. The reveal. The reckoning. The quiet ruin of the empire that had tried to keep me beneath its staircase. Had I taken back everything they stole? Or was there still something missing? That's when the email came in. Subject: Urgent, Langston Equity Holdings. I opened it with the same calm I opened contracts now. No fear, no thrill, just precision. It was from their external counsel. Formal request for a meeting. Not to negotiate, but to settle. Langston Equity Holdings had reached the tipping point. The SEC probe had uncovered falsified reports, off-ledger investments, and illegal trust misappropriations. My father was no longer CEO. The board had demanded his resignation to protect their remaining assets. The firm was on the edge of collapse, and they wanted my help to keep it alive. The irony nearly made me laugh. But instead, I replied with a single sentence. Schedule it. Not because I wanted to save them. Because I wanted them to look me in the eye. To see what they'd thrown away. To know that I didn't need to destroy them. They destroyed themselves by betting on the wrong daughter. The meeting was set for the following Thursday. Downtown San Francisco. Langston Equity's main conference room. A place I hadn't stepped foot in since I was 18, when I sat in the lobby for 3 hours waiting to ask my father for a loan to start a prototype. He never came down. Had his assistant say he was too busy. This time they were all waiting when I walked in. My father. My stepmother. Chloe. And 4 grim-faced board members who now understood exactly who they'd miscalculated. I wore all black. No jewelry. No makeup. Just presence. It was more than enough. They didn't rise when I entered. Not out of disrespect. Out of uncertainty. No one knew how to address the person who held their fate in her hand. Miss Langston, one of the board members began, clearing his throat. We're here today to explore options. Salvage strategies. Took a seat. Opened my tablet. Tapped once. Option 1, I said. You liquidate Langston Equity Holdings. Sell off your remaining assets. Pay out what you owe. Walk away. Chloe shifted uncomfortably. Option 2, I continued. Zephr acquires your remaining shares at a valuation 60% below market, restructures the firm as a subsidiary, and rewrites the leadership structure entirely. I looked up. Effective immediately. My father's jaw clenched. You want my company? No, I said simply. I want your illusion of control. And I already have it. Silence. Then my stepmother leaned forward, voice cracking slightly. You can't erase us, Ava. We're still your family. I met her gaze steady. No. You were my reminder. Of what? Chloe asked, almost a whisper. I turned to her. That silence is often the loudest kind of strength. Then I slid the contract across the table. No bluff. No trick. Just clarity. They signed it. All of them. And with every stroke of the pen, The balance of legacy shifted, irrevocably. That night, back in the penthouse, Arjun called. "You good?" he asked. I stared out at the skyline. The same skyline Chloe once described like she owned it. "I think," I said slowly, "I'm finally getting there." He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Because when you've spent your whole life being ignored, unseen, and underestimated, sometimes getting to a place where you can just be is the most powerful thing of all. The first time I felt alone in that penthouse wasn't when I bought it. It was after the deal was done. Langston Equity was now under Zephr's full control. The ink was dry. The accounts frozen. My father stripped of power. Chloe suspended pending an internal investigation. My stepmother humiliated across social circles she once ruled like royalty. It was everything I had planned for. Everything I had worked for. But in the quiet that followed the storm, something unexpected crept in. Grief. Not for them. But for the version of myself I had to bury to get here. For the girl who used to leave handwritten notes outside her father's door, hoping he'd see her. For the teenager who built her first prototype between school and waiting tables, only to hear, "It's not a real job if you can't explain it to grandma." For the woman who spent birthdays alone, because no one remembered unless Chloe had something to celebrate too. That night I didn't sleep. I opened a file I hadn't looked at in 3 years. Project Homecoming. Every receipt. Every email. Every ignored pitch. Every time they looked through me like I was a window, transparent and forgettable. I thought reading it again would make me feel powerful. Didn't. Just made me tired. Because power wasn't the prize. Peace was. The next morning, I told Serena to cancel my meetings. I drove instead, to the one place I swore I'd never return. The house. Not to gloat. Not to reclaim. To close the door myself. The gates opened automatically. Chloe's Range Rover was gone. My father's silver Jag too. But my stepmother's Lexus still sat like a monument in the driveway. The air was eerily still. Inside, the house looked smaller than I remembered. Less intimidating. Less cold. Almost ordinary. I walked past the living room where I used to sit silently while they toasted Chloe's potential. Past the staircase where I once waited, wearing the dress I'd bought for my graduation dinner, only to be told they were running late from a wine tasting. And then I stood at the door to my room. Now Chloe's. Opened it. Coastal chic wallpaper. Marble desk. Gold-framed motivational quotes. Hustle with grace. The same space where I built the first lines of Zephyr's engine was now an aesthetic Instagram set. I stood there for a moment, then stepped back and closed the door. I didn't need that room anymore. Because what I built was no longer confined to 4 walls. It lived in the hands of thousands of users across continents, industries, and institutions. They took the room. I took the world. On my way out, I passed the garage. And I stopped. It was still cluttered. Unfinished. Tools scattered across the bench. A single bulb buzzing overhead. But in the far corner, something caught my eye. An old corkboard. My corkboard. The one they hadn't bothered to throw away. Covered in curling pages. Early sketches, sticky notes, diagrams half faded by sun and time. I stepped closer. And there it was. The original flowchart for the neural engine. The foundation of everything. I reached up, took it off the board, and folded it carefully. Not out of nostalgia, but because even the sharpest minds sometimes need to remember where they came from. I left everything else behind. As I drove away, the gates closed slowly behind me, like the final blink of a chapter that would never reopen. That evening, Arjun and I sat on the rooftop of Zephyr's downtown office, drinking coffee like we used to back when the company was just a Google Doc and a dream. "You did it," he said. "Yeah," I replied, watching the sun melt into the bay. "But it's not about them anymore." He nodded. "What's it about now?" I looked up at the sky. Legacy. Not the kind you inherit. The kind you build. 3 days later, a reporter from Forbes called. They wanted a new feature. Not on Zephr. Me. My journey. My company. My rise. I told them I'd think about it. Because part of me wanted to disappear again. to create in peace without applause or commentary. But another part of me, the part that used to whisper "you're not enough" every time Chloe got another trophy, knew something else. Visibility wasn't weakness. It was proof. Proof that the girl who was overlooked could become the woman impossible to ignore. 3 weeks after the takeover, I stood backstage at a fintech summit in Singapore, one of the biggest in the world. Zephr Technologies was the keynote sponsor. My name was printed across the banners in bold white text, beneath a single line they'd asked me to approve for the introduction. From the garage to global. Ava Langston, the architect of the future. I didn't smile when I saw it. Not because I wasn't proud, but because I felt it now. In my bones. In my breath. That I had become something they couldn't erase, no matter how hard they tried. When I stepped onto that stage, it wasn't for the applause. It was for the silence. The one I'd lived in for years. The one so many others were still trapped inside. Building, hoping, bleeding behind closed doors, all while being told they were not quite enough. So I spoke. Not about algorithms. Not about AI. But about invisibility. About what it feels like to sit in rooms that aren't built for you. To speak and not be heard. To build and not be seen. And to rise anyway. To anyone listening right now, I said into the mic, who's ever been pushed aside, underestimated, overlooked, this is for you. Your quiet doesn't make you weak. Makes you dangerous. Because the world underestimates the ones it forgets. Until it's too late. The room was silent. Not out of indifference. Out of recognition. Because they knew I wasn't just telling my story. I was telling theirs. After the summit, I returned to San Francisco. Zephr was thriving. Langston Equity had been quietly dissolved, its name absorbed into a digital graveyard of forgotten firms. My father was consulting somewhere in Boston, out of the spotlight. Chloe had taken a leave of absence. My stepmother, last I heard, was selling off jewelry to cover back taxes. But I didn't watch them anymore. Not out of mercy. Out of clarity. Because winning didn't mean holding them down. It meant rising so high their judgment couldn't reach me anymore. One morning I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside 3 words. I was wrong. I didn't need to open it to know who it was from. But I didn't need their apology either. Because I had already made peace. Not with them. With me. Now, when people ask how it all started, I tell them this. It started with rejection. It started with exile. It started with a garage. But most of all, it started with being told I didn't belong. And realizing that I didn't have to. Because I could build a world where I did. Where I owned the table, not just the seat. Where the ones like me, builders, dreamers, daughters left behind, weren't just welcome. We were leading. If you've made it this far, thank you. Not just for listening, but for seeing me. Because for so long they didn't. And if you've ever been told you're too quiet, too different, too complicated, too invisible, this story is yours too. You don't need permission. You don't need applause. You don't even need a room. All you need is fire. So build. In silence if you must. But build. And when the time is right, let the world see what they tried so hard to ignore. Sometimes the best thing they can do is doubt you. And the best thing you can do is rise anyway.